don't know.
Agitatorium nostrum in nomine Domini.
Qui redigerum et I'll let you borrow mine. We just pass it to each other.
The encyclical Libertas Praestantissimum. Who wrote it?
Pope Leo XIII.
When?
1888.
Yes, we left off on paragraph 9. What has been said of the liberty of individuals is no less applicable to them who one considered as bound together in civil society. For what reason in the natural law do for individuals, that human law, promulgated for their good, does for the citizens of states. So what applies to the individual also applies to a group of individuals, the nation, the city, the international union of all men united in Christ in the Catholic Church. So Caesar, we always go back to those great words of our Lord, render to God what is God's, render to
Caesar what is Caesar's.
And then as St. Augustine says, Caesar has a duty to render to God what is God's also. Right? So the authority of the governments have a duty to acknowledge Christ as King and obey him. Of the laws enacted by men, some are concerned with what is good or bad by its very nature, and they command men to follow after what is right and to shun what is wrong, adding at the same time a suitable sanction. So laws enacted by men who have authority to pass laws, they pass laws for the good of society and the punishment of the wicked. So those who steal, they're going to be punished. Those who commit murder, they will be either imprisoned or face capital punishment at the decision of the authority that's given by God, called the lawful authority of the state, right? But such laws by no means derive their origin from the people, from civil society. Such laws that are passed for the encouragement of the good, the protection of the common good, and the punishment of evildoers, such laws do not derive their origin from the people, from civil society. Because just as civil society, or the people, did not create human nature, so neither can it be said to be the author of the good which befits human nature, or of the evil which is contrary to it. Laws come before men live together in society, and have their origin in the natural and consequently in the
Eternal.
So laws come from the natural law and the eternal law. Laws come from the natural law and the eternal law. Laws come from the
Natural law and the eternal law.
laws come from the
Natural law and the eternal law.
laws come from the
natural law and the eternal law.
and what is the eternal law?
It is the natural law.
No, it's
No.
the law of God.
It's God himself. He is the eternal law. He is that law, the law of charity. But he's infinitely merciful, he's infinitely just. So those who turn away from him and offend him and spit at him, they will be punished. And every single sin will be punished. God is, he's God. So he can. And he punishes and gives us the chance to make reparation here on earth by the tears, sorrows, thorns of this life, which if we offer it out of perfect love of God, in union with the Immaculate Heart of Mary, you can burn off your whole purgatory on earth, which is far better than going to purgatory. But if we haven't done sufficient temporal punishment for our sins on earth, we will pay for it in purgatory. He will be saved, yet so as by fire, says St. Paul. He will be saved, yet so as by fire. And then St. Paul talks about some have wood to burn, some have stubble, and some have, what's the other word? the degrees of purification that each soul has to go. Stubble, wood, and chaff, something like that. So the natural law, which is built into man with reason and will and passions, the natural law is merely the imprinting of the eternal law in us. And it can be summed up in one simple rule. What?
The Ten Commandments.
The Ten Commandments. And those can be summed up in do.
Oh, do good, avoid evil.
That's it. Do good, avoid evil. So the natural law is the participation of man in the eternal law, says St. Thomas Aquinas. And it's a beautiful treatise on law. That's another one you can meditate on as priests. So the civil law and the church law, we call it the ecclesiastical law, these also are the express expression, they are the expression of the eternal law in practice. Both civil and ecclesiastical laws. They participate in the eternal law of God. And they also are for the common good and for the punishment of the wicked. But the punishment of the wicked in the church is suspension, interdict, excommunication, or admonition. In the civil law, it takes the form of penalties, fines, whatever. And the civil law has that authority. They can fine for certain crimes. They can imprison or jail for certain definite crimes. For example, abortionists, they should all be rounded up and put in prison.
Well, I'd say probably, maybe not all of them, I mean most of them, some of them put to death.
Yeah, well in a normal, like the doctor, what was his name? Just a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. This doctor, I mean, wow, he committed thousands of abortions, and he must have gone mad because he kept the aborted fetuses in jars. They found jars of all these aborted fetuses in the back of his car, in his basement. He must have gone like mad. Which these sins against nature must drive people insane. Right? Bishop Williamson always used to quote a saying, God always forgives, man sometimes, but nature never. God forgives always, nature sometimes, God forgives always, man sometimes, nature never. So God always forgives sins if they're sorry and repentant, because he's such a loving and good and merciful Father. Man, he's not always like God. He can be cruel and cold-hearted and not forgive. But nature, when we sin against nature, such as murder of a baby or our neighbor, such as sodomy, such as, sodomitism, and what else? Sins against nature.
Killing of one's parents or children.
Yes. And suicide, well, of course, suicide finishes.
Messing with your bodily structure, organ.
Yes, sins against nature, yes. Trying to surgically turn oneself into a woman if he's a man or vice versa. These are all sins against nature. And fornication, is that a sin against nature?
No.
It's
Not
against
strictly.
justice, but not. I don't think strictly.
Adultery is against justice. Fornication is against charity and purity, but it's not against nature.
Right.
So fornication, a man with a woman, they sin, they'll go to hell for it, but those are not sins against nature. So there's degrees of sins, just like there's degrees of virtues. So the natural law is man's participation in the eternal law, and the ecclesiastical law, which is called human law, civil and ecclesiastical, they are to reflect the eternal law. So they don't have the right to pass laws that go against the Ten Commandments, for example. which the governments of the Western world have done, and therefore provoke God's anger. All right, so we're going into some deep stuff here. This is really beautiful. We're on top of page 7. Let me repeat the last sentence, bottom of page 6. But such laws by no means derive their origin from civil society. So these good laws enacted by the state and the church are not from the people. Because just as civil society, or the people, did not create human nature, so neither can it be said to be the author of the good which befits human nature, or of the evil which is contrary to it. So Pope Leo XIII is countering Robespierre and Danton of the French Revolution, who were teaching that laws are just fabrications of man when they come together in society. They have to fabricate laws to just avoid killing each other. But that's not true. Pope Leo XIII is just saying what St. Thomas teaches and what all Aristotle teaches. No, the natural law, men living in society need an authority and need laws because it's built in by God. It's built in. Laws must be passed to help men attain their end. For the state, it's so that men can live virtuous and have a sufficiency of material goods to live virtuous. And the ecclesiastical, the church law, is to look to the salvation of their soul. So both work together to help man attain heaven, their eternal last end. This is our purpose on earth. So it's just a nightmare, a real horror that states would pass laws allowing abortion. Laws come before men live together in society, contrary to Robespierre and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and have their origin in the natural and consequently in the eternal law. It's very, very important, these points, because we're Catholic, but the Pope is saying, don't believe what I'm writing just because it's me, the Pope, but believe it because God wrote it into the nature of things. This is a very important point, because the popes don't speak arbitrarily. They always say, look, this is the way God built it. I, as Pope, just affirm it and teach it. While we could say that these conciliar popes, they're acting arbitrarily, because it's not in the nature of men to have atheistic governments in societies. That's not in the nature of things. But with the document on religious liberty, they promote this. And Archbishop Lefebvre has a very powerful statement in They Have Uncrowned Him. He says this Vatican II Church of religious liberty promotes the atheistic state. The pluralism of all religions, and the state neutral means state atheism. And that's against nature for the state to be atheistic. It's not willed by God. So yeah, these Vatican II popes are acting arbitrarily, making up laws that go against God's law. But not the good popes of tradition. That's why when we get a good pope, he'll probably condemn John the 23rd, Paul VI for sure. His ST in front of his name will be trashed because he didn't earn it. And then all these other popes, they'll probably be condemned, very seriously condemned. All right, the precepts, therefore, of the natural law, contained bodily in the laws of men. So the natural law, the Ten Commandments written in us, is expressed in the laws of men, have not merely the force of human law, but they possess that higher and more august sanction which belongs to the law of nature and the eternal law. So when the civil law says you cannot kill your neighbor, it's not just because president or governor so-and-so say so. It's backed by what?
By the natural law, and consequently the eternal law.
Yes. And within the sphere of this kind of laws, the duty of the civil legislator is mainly to keep the community in obedience by the adoption of a common discipline, and by putting restraint upon refractory and viciously inclined men, so that deterred from evil they may turn to what is good, and at any rate may avoid causing trouble and disturbance to the state. So it is a good thing when the state punishes evil. For example, imprisonment for a murderer, or public execution, or private execution, whatever it is. But everyone knows if I do this, if I kill my neighbor or I steal this property, I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to be executed. So what does that do to criminals who, I don't care about God's law, I don't care about hell, I'm just going to do it anyway. I want that guy's, I want his truck. So I sneak into the house, grab the keys, and take the truck and drive off. Well, I'm caught. And I can expect what from the state? Punishment. And that's a big crime, stealing a truck. That would be certainly a mortal sin. That would be at least some time in prison. Right? Now, there are other enactments of the civil authority which do not follow directly but somewhat remotely from the natural law, and decide many points which the law of nature treats only in a general and definite way. So these would be the lesser laws, such as traffic laws, taxation. For instance, though nature commands all to contribute to the public peace and prosperity, whatever belongs to the manner and circumstances and conditions under which such services is to be rendered must be determined by the wisdom of men and not by nature herself. So God leaves to the human authorities to make reasonable laws. God doesn't say, you got to make traffic laws. You got to make laws about taxation. You got to make laws about this and that. God doesn't do that because he respects the free will and the human reason. I read on, it is in the constitution of these particular rules of life, suggested by reason and prudence, and put forth by competent authority, that human law, properly so called, consists, binding all citizens to work together for the attainment of the common end, proposed to the community or society, and forbidding them to depart from this end or purpose, and in so far as human law is in conformity with the dictates of nature, leading to what is good and deterring from evil. So in this light, you see how law is actually very reasonable. It's fitting according to the nature of things, it's willed by God, and it's a good thing. But in the modern mentality, all law is seen as a restraint upon my freedom, right? But we've criminalized what freedom is all about and what laws are. So you see how it brings peace to society, the Catholic way of thinking. It brings peace and order. And men willingly see the place for law. It's reasonable. I should obey the law. And as long as the law of the state doesn't go against God's law. So in the case of St. Cyprian, he was always obedient to the emperor, but he had to disobey when?
When he was told to sacrifice or offer incense to the idols.
Shouldn't he have obeyed? After all, it was the highest civil authority.
No, because it was an order obviously going against the law of God.
And when St. Athanasius was told, stop preaching the Nicene Creed, stop saying that Christ is God, and submit to the Semi-Arian Creed, by order of Pope Liberius, and this is the highest authority over the civil and the church, the Pope himself. Shouldn't St. Athanasius have simply just obeyed and be quiet?
No, because again, the authorities, who in this case happened to be the Pope, was asking or telling him to do something which was against the law of God.
Which is a heresy, right?
Yes.
So he had to say what St. Peter and Paul said, what? We must obey
God rather than men.
Uh, 10. Andres?
From this, it is manifest that the eternal law of God is the sole standard and rule of human liberty, not only in each individual man, but also in the community and civil society which men constitute when united.
Okay, stop. How often do you ever hear of the eternal law of God? You never hear of it, right?
In our laws, never.
But, we sing that in the Mass of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. What is it again? He gives a law of sweetness, of meekness, and order to direct us to Him. So all law is seen in the light of the eternal law. All law leads to God, and should, indirectly or directly. Go on.
But also, therefore the true liberty of human society does not consist in every man doing what he pleases. For this would simply end in turmoil and confusion.
Repeat.
Therefore, the true liberty of human society does not consist in every man doing what he pleases. For this would simply end in turmoil and confusion, and bring on the overthrow of the state, but rather in this, that through the injunctions of the civil law, all may more easily conform to the prescriptions of the eternal law.
Yes. So the civil law and the ecclesiastical just help man towards his last end. Like I said, if I see I'm tempted to steal, or I'm angry at my neighbor and I want to kill him, when I know there's a big punishment, I'll think twice. And when the priests and bishops are telling me you're going to go to hell if you break the laws of God in a serious way and die unrepentant, you go forever into the fires of hell, then I think twice. Right? So in other words, you need this negative theology to keep men on the right path. If the thief and the wild-natured man who's out of control doesn't fear hell and doesn't fear punishment, what's going to stop him if he's perverse?
The civil law.
Well, hopefully. But, in the democratic states now, Republicans not much better, but anyway, they're allowing these criminals to go free. Depending on your skin color, you get in prison. If you're one color, if you're not, you get scot-free. And you talk about racism.
I know.
So where's the justice, huh?
You could say the law is empty without consequences.
Yes. Yes. Try running a boys' school without laws.
Oh.
Try running a boys' school without clear laws. St. John Bosco said the laws of a school should be simple, few, and clear. Boys like it. They obey that easy. But if they're overburdened with stupid laws, don't run up the steps. Don't talk in the halls. Don't do this. Don't do. You're going to kill the spirit of a boys' school, for example. So it can't be overburdensome laws. And some priests get carried away with laws on the schools. And I've had to talk to numerous headmasters, priests in charge, and saying, Father, if you pass a law in the hallway that they can't talk, they can't talk in the classroom, they can't talk in the hallway, they're going to blow up somehow. You can't do this to them. They're going to talk, they're going to be sneaky, they're going to try to talk around the corners. Just let them talk in the halls. And in the classroom, they can talk in the classroom, but not during class. And anyway, so in one case, I was able to get a priest to realize, that's not reasonable. Because what's going to happen is some boys are going to talk, then they're going to get caught by the teachers and going to get punished and detention. So it just brings the spirit down of a whole school, right? And then after 3 detentions, they get expelled. For what? Because they were talking in the hall, which is not a big transgression.
Yeah, it kind of inspires rebellion also, because when it's stupid like that,
Yes.
it's nonsensical,
it's like the the adolescent rebellious comes out a lot.
That's right.
more.
That's right.
So it's just they're going to defy it for the sake of defying it, because
That's right.
so.
Saint Anselm. Some abbots wrote him and said, "How do you do so successful with your boys' school? Your boys come out well and virtuous and happy. Because here at my monastery, they're just bitter and rebellious. What do you do?" And St. Anselm writes back and says, boys are, and girls too, boys, they're like plants. The young are like plants. If you overtie them to the stick that's supposed to guide them, like tomato plants, guide them upward, but you overtie their branches and twigs, you're going to stifle them and deform them. So you have to tie them with few laws, but certain clear laws, but not overly strangle them. So because you want to help them aspire to great things and be virtuous and do great things for God and their neighbor. But if you over-strangle them with laws, you're going to deform them and turn them either to be bitter, rebellious, or just flimsy yes men. So there's a lot of wisdom in these words. And I've seen it. I've been in many, many schools, and I've seen it. And so you can err either on the side of too many laws and you just strangle them with stupid laws, or overly permissive, such as, in a school where there's boys and girls, the high school girls on one end, boys on the other end, there has to be a strict demarcation. Otherwise there'll be some trouble, because the chemistry just attracts. So yes, any boy caught riding to a girl or a girl riding to a boy, go home. Any girl walking around in a miniskirt, go home and get a long dress on. Any boy or girl sneaking into the woods and they're found, they go home. So there has to be clear laws that are strict, right? So but St. Anselm gives the right answer. You tie them to the pole only insofar as it helps them guide them to go higher. And St. Thomas Aquinas says, how do you get people out of their apathy? How do you get people to aspire to great things? Give them great goals. The supreme good goals, which are the glory of God, the salvation of souls, the kingship of Christ, the conversion of the world to Christ the King. These are huge goals, and they're great and noble. All right. So, likewise, everybody see where we are? Page 7. On the right side, paragraph down.
Yes.
Pick it up, Andres.
Likewise, the liberty of those who are in authority does not consist in the power to lay unreasonable and capricious commands upon their subjects, which would equally be criminal and would lead to the ruin of the commonwealth. But
Okay, stop. What's capricious commands? Anybody?
Commands given out of pride? Like, is that what it means? Or?
Capricious means at one's whim. So just giving meaningless rules. Just giving meaningless rules. What would be an example of that? Well, seatbelts could be arguably one of those. What's another one? Perfect example in Canada. Under Trudeau, he passed 2 carbon taxes, which is a burden on the people. And carbon tax, what's that? You leave your footprint, you leave some carbon, and you burn gas, you burn fuel. This is polluting the environment with carbon. Nonsense. And carbon dioxide, you need that for the world to function. You need it. The plants emit it. So those are the examples of capricious laws and commands that have no reason, have no purpose. Go on. So why don't you pick up again with likewise?
Okay. Likewise, the liberty of those who are in authority does not consist in the power to lay unreasonable and capricious commands upon their subjects, which would equally be criminal and would lead to the ruin of the commonwealth. But the binding force of human laws is in this, that they are to be regarded as applications of the eternal law, and incapable of sanctioning anything which is not contained in the eternal law, as in the principle of all law. Thus St. Augustine most wisely says, open quote, "I think that you can see at the same time that there is nothing just and lawful in that temporal law, unless what men have gathered from this the eternal law." Close quote.
Yes. Yes. So this also applies to the church authority. They're not allowed to invent a new mass. They're not allowed to invent new doctrines. That goes for the church's authority also. And if they do, sorry, we must obey God rather than men. You want us to say that new mass, which is Protestant, erodes the faith, attacks the real presence, attacks the sacrificial nature of the mass? Sorry, we have to obey God more than men. So the Archbishop Lefebvre did that. And he was right. Go on.
If then by anyone in authority something be sanctioned out of conformity with the principles of right reason, and consequently hurtful to the commonwealth, such an enactment can have no binding force of law, as being no rule of justice, but certainly to lead men away from that good which is the very end of civil society.
Yes. So, but those in authority, they don't have the right to just pass meaningless laws that can be burdensome also and distort the purpose of law. 11, read on please, Anthony.
Therefore, the nature of human liberty, however it be considered, whether in individuals or in society, whether in those who command or in those who obey, supposes the necessity of obedience to some supreme and eternal law, which is no other than the authority of God, commanding good and forbidding evil. And so far from this most just authority of God over men diminishing or even destroying their liberty, it protects and perfects it. For the real perfection of all creatures is found in the prosecution and attainment of their respective ends. But the supreme end to which human liberty must aspire is God.
Yes, so laws should help men attain their purpose. 12, go on, Michael.
These precepts of the truest and highest teaching, made known to us by the light of reason itself, the Church, instructed by the example and doctrine of her divine author, has ever propagated and asserted, for she has ever made them the measure of her office and of her teaching to the Christian nations. As to morals, the laws of the gospel not only immeasurably surpass the wisdom of the heathen, but are an invitation and an introduction to a state of holiness unknown to the ancients, and bring man nearer to God. They make him at once the possessor of a more perfect liberty. Thus, the powerful influence of the Church has ever been manifested in the custody and protection of the civil and political liberty of the people.
Okay, this is a very beautiful point by Pope Leo XIII. The Church, by teaching the gospel, the law of charity, love of God and neighbor, elevates society and brings even protection to the civil law, to the civil authorities. It even helps them to quell, for example, revolutions. To quell revolutions. Read on.
The enumeration of its merits in this respect does not belong to our present purpose. It is sufficient to recall the fact that slavery, that old reproach of the heathen nations, was mainly abolished by the beneficent efforts of the Church.
Okay. What does St. Paul write to Philemon, who's a slave?
He told him
rebel against your master, get a group together and chop his head off and declare yourselves free. Is that what he says?
No.
What does St. Paul say? To a slave.
Servants, obey your masters as in the Lord, something like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And even the hot-tempered one, Discolis.
And he told him to go back to his master too.
That's right. Go back to your master, honor him, and serve him for the love of God. So slavery is not the worst of evils. That's an important point. But the church, by her doctrine of the charity of the Sacred Heart, love of God and neighbor, it sweetens the relations of men with other men, men with wealth, men who work, men who have property and possessions, and those who work for them. They're to be treated with honor. There was a Catholic slave owner in Florida. You can visit the plantation there. And he was a Catholic wealthy man near Jacksonville. I forget his name. But he had the black servants, they had their homes, nice homes on his property for each family. And they had their children, and he would invite them to come to Mass on Sundays. They didn't have to work on Sunday. He treated them with honor, with respect. They loved their master. There was a friendship and joy and charity between them. And he didn't whip them. He didn't mistreat them. He might have had to correct them, maybe even sometimes harshly if they were really doing something stupid. But that's Catholicism. It sweetens that relationship, so it dissolves slavery. Catholicism dissolves slavery, and that's what the church did over time. Right? Rome was built on a system of slavery. So was the Mayan Empire, the Aztecs. But when the church came, it just sweetens it all. Because Christ says, what you do to the least,
of these you do to me.
and when you really practice that, you can't mistreat your neighbor. You can't just kick him like a dog. Because what you do to your fellow man, you do to Christ. You see how the doctrine of our Lord changes society. It's the leaven in the dough that turns men from cruel beasts to each other to at least charitable and polite out of love for God and love for the neighbor. You follow? These are very important points. Who's in the middle of all this is the Catholic priest. Who is the one that tells them, take care of the poor in your parish? There's a family that had a house burned down. We're going to make a collection and let's help this family. Right? So, it's the church that teaches this charity. And the priest is right in the middle of it to preach the love of God, of the Sacred Heart, the love of God, the love of your neighbor, etc., etc. So the priest is right in the middle of all this. St. John Chrysostom, he had to yell at the wealthy people in Constantinople. He said, you sit on your wealth while the poor are scouring for food in the streets. Give to the poor and you'll make yourselves wealthy in heaven. Take care of the poor. But he wouldn't tell the poor, you demand your rights. This is Marxist theology. You have to demand your rights and wage war and rebellion against the wealthy. He doesn't say that either, which is what? Who promoted that? The class strife.
Karl
Marx. Marxism, communism. So communism puts a war between the wealthy and the poor. Christ said, the poor you will always have with you. But those who have, help those in need. So you see how the Gospels just sweetens the relationships in all nations. And it dissolves slavery. That's why the media in the U.S., owned by you-know-who, they've been trying for years to stir a revolution in the United States. The most recent one was, this whole Black Lives Matter thing. They want to stir a civil war, but they just can't because people are still too affected by the Gospels, even today. Because blacks and whites in the U.S. pretty much get along well. We see them in the airport, you see them everywhere. In general, they get along very well. But the media is trying to stir a revolution and get things going to stir a war, but they just can't succeed yet. Because people still now, as far gone as we are still influenced by the gospel. That's the power of Christendom. Okay, so we'll stop there. Adjutorium nostrum in nomine Domini.